So welcome everyone to this celebration of life for Marlene Macke. She was quite amazing how organized she was, and she organized her life and death. It was quite a remarkable experience knowing her, knowing the high standards she set for herself in the way she did everything. And yet she was very loving and tolerant and patient, educational in the way she treated others. So it's quite a lovely combination of characteristics. And so when she spoke to me a couple of months before her passing, and she said, "Look, Tony, this is what's going to happen, and I would like you to just welcome everybody and just make sure that things happen like this." And she also spoke to other people who are online, Susan, who helped organize, and we formed a little team to make sure we did it as well as we could. So Marlene, okay, this is for you. I hope this is acceptable, and we know her. She's very loving. So thank you very much to all of you. So friends, family, thank you very much to Andrew Hodges, who's set all this up so beautifully. It's been great collaborating with him. I've been asked just to point out that you can see some wall there, which are a blue band, that building just before the bowling fields. That's where the washrooms are, if anybody needs it. We do have water here, so you can help yourself to water. And there will be, towards the end, somebody will come from baristas to set up some coffee and a little bit of cake. So we'll have something to share afterwards. Oh, thank you. There is a binder there with lots of eulogies, things that have been sent in, and information about Marlene's life that Katie was very kind enough to put together with some photographs. So I believe these have been sent out, but if you haven't received it, just let us know, and we'll send it out to you. Also, there's a sign-in book just for contact reasons if you haven't told us beforehand that you were going to be here. Before we start, I just want to check, because I'm sorry, I don't know everybody. So Susan is online, and so hopefully we'll be able to connect up. So some people who are through Zoom will also be able to participate with the readings. And we've got here and Gillian. So all the readers are here. And I just want to check for the online. Is Nancy Ackerman online?
I don't know.
So I will just mention the name when it comes up, and then
Tony, I believe you're reading her presentation.
Nancy.
You've been told you're reading her presentation.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I do. So, all right, so Susan, would you please read her presentation for us? Because it was one of the things I didn't print that one out. So would that be all right, Susan? The eulogy from Nancy?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. And then is Ginny Rochester Orr with us? Online?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Good, because I have your readings in case. So Susan's here. Anne Perry, are you with us as well? Okay, so
yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Thank you very much, Anne. And Will van der Hunerd? All right, I'll read Will's at the end then. So with that,
Will is here. Will is here.
Oh, Will is here. Great.
So I'm going to attempt to share the screen now. Bear with me.
Okay, so as people speak, we can see them. You're doing a great job here.
Oh, hey, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah, this is awesome. So, so to start off with, Marlene particularly enjoyed when holy writings were sung, and often asked Jill or thanked Jill if she could sing one of the readings. And this is a very appropriate piece to start us off with. So Jill is going to start with that. And Faye, you're fairly close, so as she finishes, if you'd like to come up. And then you've all got the order in the program. So if you're going to come up next, feel free to come close and sit here if you want. And then as soon as, we don't have to rush through it, but just try and keep it fairly smooth. Welcome, everyone. And we'll start. Oh, yes. Those are the trees that were planted at the bicentenary of the passing of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And the local community decided to plant first 5 oak trees, they're white oaks, and then 4 more, so they're 9 altogether. And Marlene was very devoted to these trees. She would come several times a week with a carload full of buckets of water and would pour a couple of buckets on each one. And some of us helped her sometimes, but she invariably came. And so it is very fitting that we're here with that, the view of those trees that are there to commemorate the bicentenary. Okay, thank you.
Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow where mention of God hath been made, and his praise glorified. O Lord, O thou whose mercy hath encompassed all, whose forgiveness is transcendent, whose bounty is sublime, whose pardon and generosity are all-embracing, and the lights of whose forgiveness are diffused throughout the world. O Lord of glory, I entreat thee, fervently and cheerfully, to cast upon thy handmaiden who hath ascended unto thee the glances of the eye of thy mercy. Robe her in the mantle of thy grace, bright with the ornaments of the celestial paradise, and sheltering her beneath the tree of thy oneness. Illumine her face with the lights of thy mercy and compassion. Bestow upon thy heavenly handmaiden, O God, the holy fragrances born of the spirit of thy forgiveness. Cause her to dwell in a blissful abode. Heal her griefs with the balm of thy reunion, and, in accordance with thy will, grant her admission to holy paradise. Let the angels of thy loving kindness descend successively upon her, and shelter her beneath thy blessed tree. Thou art verily the ever-forgiving, the most generous, the all-bountiful.
Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thou thy worldly task hast done, home art gone, and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers, come to dust. Fear no more the frown of the great, thou art past the tyrant's stroke. Care no more to clothe and eat, to thee the reed is as the oak. The scepter, learning, physic, must all follow this and come to dust. Fear no more the lightning flash, nor the all-dreaded thunderstone. Fear not slander, censure rash. Thou hast finished joy and moan. All lovers young, all lovers must consign to thee and come to dust.
These few brief days shall pass away. This present life shall vanish from our sight. The roses of this world shall be fresh and fair no more. The garden of this earth's triumphs and delights shall droop and fade. The spring season of life shall turn into the autumn of death. The bright joy of palace halls give way to moonless dark within the tomb. He who hath knowledge and power will rather seek out the glory of heaven and spiritual distinction and the life that dieth not. And such is one longeth to approach the sacred threshold of God.
Rejoice, for the heavenly table is prepared for you. Rejoice, for the angels of heaven are your assistants and helpers. Rejoice, for the glance of the blessed beauty, Baha'u'llah, is directed upon you. Rejoice, for Baha'u'llah is your protector. Rejoice, for the everlasting glory is destined for you. Rejoice, for the eternal life is awaiting you.
Thou hast, moreover, asked me concerning the state of the soul after its separation from the body. Know thou of a truth, that if the soul of man hath walked in the ways of God, it will assuredly return and be gathered to the glory of the beloved. By the righteousness of God, it shall attain a station such as no pen can depict or tongue describe. The soul that hath remained faithful to the cause of God and stood unwaveringly firm in his path shall, after his ascension, be possessed of such power that all the worlds which the Almighty hath created can benefit through him. Such a soul provideth, at the bidding of the ideal King and divine educator, the pure leaven that leaveneth the world of being, and furnisheth the power through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest.
O thou Lady of the Kingdom, praise thou God that in this age, the age of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, thou hast been awakened and hast been made aware of the manifestation of the Lord of hosts. All the people of the world are buried in the graves of nature, or are slumbering heedlessly and unaware. Just as Christ said, I may come when you are not aware. The coming of the Son of Man is like the coming of a thief in the house, the owner of which is utterly unaware. In brief, my hope is that from the bounties of Baha'u'llah, thou mayest daily advance in the kingdom, that thou mayest become a heavenly angel, confirmed by the breaths of the Holy Spirit, and mayest erect a structure that shall eternally remain firm and unshakable. These days are very precious. Grasp the present opportunity and ignite a candle that shall never be extinguished, and which shall pour out its light eternally illuminating the world of mankind.
به نام گوینده توانا، ای صاحبان هوش و گوش، اول سروش دوست این است. ای بلبل معنوی جز در گلبن معانی جای مگزین، و ای حدد سلیمان عشق جز در سبای جانان وطن مگیر. و ای عنقای بقا جز در قاف وفا محل مپذیر. این است مکان تو اگر بلا مکان به پر جان برپری، و آهنگ مقام خود رایگان نمایی. Ye are the stars in the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the soft flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men. Ye are the first among men to be recreated by his Spirit, the first to adore and bow thy knee before him, the first to circle round his throne of glory. Sois las estrellas del cielo del entendimiento, la brisa que sopla al amanecer, las fluyentes aguas de los cuales debe depender la vida misma de todos los hombres. the very life of all men.
Thank you very much. So that brings to a close the sharing prayers and holy writings. And there's a number of people who've wanted to share some words, just remembering Marlene and sharing some thoughts and anecdotes. So we have the list, so we can do the same. And Nancy offered to read to us to start off a page that Marlene had written, which it was My Life in a Page. So we thought it would be appropriate. And so thank you very much, Nancy. And then if Nancy Ackerman, oh, that's right. Sorry, she's online. So then she can go afterwards, and then Katie, you'll be after that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very grateful to be a part of this celebration and honoring of Marlene's life. And my connection with her mainly had to do with stories. And as Tony said, I'm going to read some of the stories that she wrote about her own life. But she also gifted us so much with a better understanding of her friend William Shakespeare. And I would sometimes have the privilege to go to Stratford with her to a play, and on the way there she would tell me what I was going to see and hear. So I had some understanding of it. So that was a very precious gift. A few years ago at the library, we had a project called My Life in a Page, and Marlene came to that workshop, and basically what we do is we pair up, we tell each other stories of some of the memories from our lives, different parts of our life. And then taking those notes, people go home and they may or may not type it up. But of course, Marlene did. So we have this gift from Marlene about her life. She calls it My Life in St. Mary's, Ontario. Childhood. Until I was 10, my family farmed on the Mitchell Road. My memories include a sense of utter freedom, solitary adventures, endless summer days, cats, dogs, 2 ponies, luscious raspberries and other good things to eat, and the Motherwell one-room schoolhouse with 40 students from grades 1 to 8. Moving to St. Mary's was initially a wrench in my life. My mother walked me up to the huge stone castle that is Central School. I quaked with apprehension as I entered Mrs. Moser's grade 5 class. We have people here who went to school with Marlene who recognize these people. Her class held close to 40 students. But soon I loved the abundance of playmates and friends and sports, softball, curling, swimming in the quarry, Girl Guides, and later in high school, the rich choice of extracurricular activities. Looking back, I realized that my farm experience offered a slice of paradise, and life in a small town represented heaven. North Ward School. And this is my favorite story. In grade 6, K.C. Seal taught so much more than the curriculum. One day near Remembrance Day, he asked what our dads had done during the war. I mentioned that my dad had been a mechanic in the Royal Canadian Air Force. A boy snorted, "Oh, that's nothing. My dad was a pilot." Mr. Seal rounded on him and barked, If it hadn't been for men like Marlene's dad, your dad would not have been safe. You should thank Mr. Macke for keeping your dad alive. Spiritual development. At age 15, I was confirmed in the United Church. I resolved to myself, I'm okay with God and with Christianity, but I'm now through with organized religion. I stopped going to church. I loved Reverend Ross Crosby, but I disavowed the formality and ritual of the church. Imagine my own astonishment when at age 21, I spontaneously declared my acceptance of Baha'u'llah, the prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith. My true spiritual home, my spiritual compass, had found me. Career. In 1973, a dream job in Ottawa launched my career. 3 years later, at age 26, I was posted as assistant manager to the Canadian consulate in Sydney, Australia. In the 1970s, women in management were rare, and nearly every male and female coworker was overtly unkind or dismissive. On the other hand, when I arrived there, messages awaited on my desk from Australian Baha'i, complete strangers to me, welcoming me, inviting me for meals and visits, offering friendship and love, accepting me sight unseen. Back home, in 1994, I returned to St. Mary's. While walking up Queen Street toward the library, I spotted Mr. Simons, my high school teacher from 25 years before, coming toward me. And my interior dialogue went, oh, do I say, hello, Mr. Simons? Or do I say, hello, Bruce? In that nanosecond, I opted for hello, Bruce. And that teeny gesture acknowledged that I had returned home as an adult. And it opened the door for me getting to know my parents anew, adult to adult. Today, I am a published author, a Shakespeare junkie, an intrepid traveler, an animal lover, happily living in St. Mary's. May 2016. And I have extra copies of this if anybody wants one. Thank you.
This is Susan Gamage. Nancy Ackerman can't be with us today. She's traveling in Spain and she doesn't have internet access. So she asked me to read this on her behalf. Dear friends of Marlene, it is a distinct honor to write about Marlene Macke, whom I didn't know well outside of our joint service for some 11 years as members of the National Review Committee, and for having edited one of her books, Faithful Friends, The Founding of Toronto Baha'i Community, 1919 to 1938, and parts of her play, Tabriz. As we most often met in my home, Marlene loved my two cats, an Oriental chocolate and a Russian blue. And with our mutual love of cats, we often traded cattails as well as recipes. My last interaction with her in person was in Ottawa, attending the Association for Baha'i Studies conference in 2019. We shared a wonderful dinner at a fine restaurant with a number of other delightful friends, including Linda O'Neill, who I believe is here today, our host, and Marlene, although looking very thin and quite unwell, regaled us to the extent of her energy with the harrowing tale of her then recent return to St. Mary's after her trip to the U.S. Thank you for those who went to rescue her. It was clear to all of us that she was not going to last very long. But she enjoyed the conference thoroughly and was her usual cheerful, uncomplaining self throughout. We continued to correspond until just 2 days before her passing, with kindest thoughts about our much loved and deeply admired mutual friend, Marlene, from Nancy Ackerman.
Good afternoon. So, I met Marlene in spring 2007 when I began working as an usher at the Stratford Festival Theatre. She always spent the spring at the Big House until her favorite, more intimate theatre, the Tom Patterson, opened up in the summer. Marlene loved being an usher. She loved talking to patrons, and most of all, she loved seeing the plays over and over and over again. Our mutual love of theater, the festival, and Shakespeare brought us together. The best moment each summer was when the festival announced the slate of plays and musicals for the next season, and we would get busy with our fantasy casting. It's too bad they never asked for our input, though, because we had some great ideas. Marlene also joined me as a volunteer at the festival, where she delighted in giving tours to visitors, her favorite place being the festival archives. Marlene was an excellent tour guide. She loved nothing more than to be asked a question. Those eyes would light up, the smile would break open, and she'd start telling you more than you could ever have hoped for. Eventually, our friendship grew to the point where we began traveling to see theater elsewhere. Niagara-on-the-Lake was a favorite spot where we could enjoy the warm hospitality of her friends Marge and Larry Clark while seeing as many plays as possible. I think our record was 6 shows in 2.5 days. Marlene created a fun wintertime group for ushers and volunteers where we would gather weekly to focus on one of the Shakespeare plays from the upcoming season. One week we would discuss the play, one week we would watch a film version of the play, and then we would invite someone connected with the production to give us a talk. Each year, Marlene would write up an extensive, detailed set of notes for us. She summarized the plot, presented the themes, and included cast lists from all past productions at the festival, along with selected quotes from the reviews. Extensive. In the last few years, she expanded this into a small lecture series for the volunteers, where she would present these papers in an effort to help educate others. She had all the instincts of a natural teacher. At the same time, she was writing articles for each of the Shakespeare productions for our volunteer website, which I had the pleasure of editing. I loved her fun titles like Othello, It All Hinges on a Hanky, and The Merry Wives of Windsor, Men Outwitted at Every Turn by Smart Women. Her playful sense of humor always shone through. I'm pleased to tell you that the Festival Archives received Marlene's papers into their collection, an arrangement she made shortly before her death. She was thrilled to know that her love's labors would not be lost. I had to. This season, the brand new Tom Patterson Theatre opened to the public after being delayed a year by COVID. It saddens me that Marlene did not live to step inside that marvelous new building, but I feel her presence with me every time I attend a play. And she will be on my shoulder in a few weeks when I get my first tour of the new theater. I miss you, my friend.
Wayne, Marlene's favorite cousin. So the last time I spoke in public was for our son's wedding, and at the last minute I gave my father, the groom, speech to Marlene for an edit and to test the humor. And she laughed so much, I decided to ask her today what I should talk about. She said hot dogs and underwear. I'm much, much younger than my cousin. At first, I only knew her as the only child whose father doted on her, giving her a pony. A pony, ha! I was lucky to get a tricycle. In 1967, our parents, the four of them, decided to go to Montreal for Expo 67, but my brother and I weren't invited. Nor was my grandmother, who lived with us. But the three of us couldn't be trusted to keep each other alive for a week, so enter Marlene, who agreed to babysit us and Grandma if she could bring lots of books and Fresca pop. Marlene wasn't too interested in cooking, even for family kids. She took a stab at cooking some hot dogs, but when she realized there were no buns, she presented the wieners on a piece of bread and pronounced her work done. It was then I realized that I needed to learn how to cook. Marlene's dust up with our grandmother over underwear made me a rich man. Grandma always wanted to buy underwear for birthday and Christmas gifts. Being the oldest and the boldest grandchild, she pointed out the obvious. Underwear isn't a gift. It's what parents are obligated to buy. So she demanded cash, all the better to buy books with. The underwear gifts stopped for all of us, and the cash started flowing. In the groovy 1960s, and on paper, Marlene was a university dropout and a victim of Trudeau-mania, who was at the Liberal Convention in 1968, so we had reason to question her judgment. Boy, were we wrong. She was the cousin who taught us to imagine and to travel and to think. She showed us how to question the authority of a grandmother and say what you honestly mean, but not how to cook a hot dog. Thank you.
Sometimes you don't realize how lucky you are with somebody until this sort of thing happens. And now I realize how lucky I was, because I knew Marlene off and on for a long time. We were in elementary school together from grade 5 on and went through high school as well. So some of the memories that you heard Nancy say, I remember too. Well, then the next time we met was when she came back to St. Mary's. So there was quite a few years after university or high school that we didn't see each other. So again, I got to meet people through Marlene, lovely, wonderful people that I still see today. So I thank her for that. Well, then she started up a new business. And the name of the business was St. Mary's House and Pet Minding for your peace of mind. Now, Marlene, as we know, was an organizer. So when she went to see the client for the first time for the pet minding and the house sitting, well, you got sheets like that, all organized, and she would sit there in the opening when she first met you and wrote all sorts of things down, like things that she would have thought up for this business. I certainly wouldn't have, but she did. And the cat profile or the dog profile and what they ate, what they like to do, the walking for the dog, like just everything. Again, I wouldn't have thought. But, you know, and she even had a policy thing. And where did I see it? Our guarantee. That was at the end of the policy. Our guarantee. St. Mary's House and Pet Minding guarantees we will provide high quality and loving care for your house and or pets as if they were our own. If you find dissatisfaction with our service, please speak to us first and we will make it right. That was Marlene. She was so well organized. And when she gave me the business and I would help her out. If she was busy with one somewhere else, then I would be busy with somebody like usually in St. Mary's. And that was wonderful because obviously we both loved animals. So this was great. Well, after she got sick, she handed me the business. And then I realized how organized she was, you know, about things. And I mean, I wouldn't have thought this until after maybe one or two things happened that I would realize, oh, but she thought it all up right from the beginning. And, but as I said, sometimes we don't realize, and she, because of her, as I said, I've met so many wonderful, wonderful people and been to places that I wouldn't have been to and met people I wouldn't have met outside of being with her. And I'm so very, very thankful that this has happened to me. And I'm just thankful that I'm here, and I thank her for being the educator that she was. And I know for a fact that, yes, she will be with us when we go into that new theater. She will be with us all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Marilyn Sargent. I first met Marlene when my husband and I moved to Ottawa. Well, I moved to Ottawa. My husband got a job in Deep River. Anyway, this long and short of it is that we were in the Baha'i community of Ottawa. And I was going to university to attain my degree in nursing. And Marlene was very kind to involve me as much as I could, being a university student, in many of the activities of the community. Two things struck me. One, that she would look at things that needed to be done. And this was at a time, one of the things was we got together and organized English as a second language for the Iranian Baha'is who had been displaced from Iran. So we're going way back. And the one, sorry, many nights, quite late, my husband Malcolm, and I were spending time developing lessons. But they couldn't be lessons that were childlike or down to a child's level because we were teaching adults. But we also had to make them simple enough so that they didn't feel they were being overwhelmed and expected to do too much. And the one conclusion we all came to is that these people are professional people. They just have their professions completed in a different language. And so you have to remember that when you are teaching people whose second language is English, that they're not stupid. They're professionals, they're nurses, they're doctors, they're chiropractors, they're teachers, and then you ask them to go through these lessons. And that was our first project. And then when the National Assembly and actually the Universal House of Justice, who is the world governing body for the Baha'is of the world, decided that they wanted to start a more organized, comprehensive way of teaching the Baha'i faith to people. We started out at a very elemental level. It was really, really elemental. And she was one of the first ones to grab Malcolm and I, and we started working on something that we thought we could work on. And then it evolved, and then it evolved, and then it evolved. And it's now called the Institute process. And we became coordinators and facilitators and that sort of thing. Along the way, Marlene realized that my husband, Malcolm, is a self-taught computer expert. So it was not uncommon for her to be calling Malcolm, not late at night. She was very considerate that way, but she would call and say, "Is Malcolm home?" I said, "No." "Okay, when he gets home, I need to talk to him." And then it would be some major, and I do mean major issue with one of her computers. And he would talk her very patiently through it all. Or if it got to the end and he said, "Marlene, you have to get a new computer." So, and that's what she relied on his judgment so much when it came to computers. The other thing is that Marlene had started a while ago, and I don't know how many the relatives would be able to tell me how long ago she started her weekly letter to her relatives to keep them updated on her activities and what was going on. And I loved that idea so much that I started it myself. Unfortunately, my life is so busy that I have not kept up it weekly. I thought I could do it every 2 weeks, and now it's become 6 months since my last letter. So let me tell you, my next letter is going to be a missive, practically a manifest, so that I can send it on to everybody. But those are some of our happy memories. Marlene and I would travel together, not often, mostly because her schedule and my schedule would not mesh. But we did manage to do 2 major trips together. One of them she organized, and it was a 7-day cruise through the Caribbean. And what was nice about traveling with Marlene is that neither one of us needed to be in each other's back pocket. So if I wanted to do something and she had no interest in it, I was fine with that, and she was fine with that. But there were often things that we would consult about. Do we want to go here, or do we want to go there together? Are you interested? Yes, I am. No, I'm not. And then we would go on those excursions together. The last trip we took together was one that I organized, which was one to Mexico to a resort. And I knew that Marlene was not comfortable with children around. So I chose a resort that was adults only, and it was all inclusive. So we didn't have to worry about paying for meals or anything like that. And we did go on 2 excursions. One was to a water park. And she absolutely loved that day because we went in the trees. It was cycling in the trees, and she loved that. And then the other one, we went to Tulum, which is where there is an Aztec pyramid, and we loved that one too. And our third one was, I said, "Do you know that there's Cirque du Soleil theater just down the road from our resort?" "What's that?" "Oh my God, you don't know what Cirque du Soleil is?" So I got us tickets, and we went, and we had supper, and it was an excellent evening. Lots of chocolate,
lots of Mexican chocolate, really interesting Cirque du Soleil performance. And then we got a taxi back to our hotel, and we were happy with that too. It was our last trip did not take place. I was supposed to meet her at Desert Rose, and we were supposed to take a trip to the Grand Canyon and then drop her back off at Desert Rose so she could do her writer's retreat. And I would hopefully have enough time to do an artist's retreat with her, but I couldn't, and it didn't work out. With her working here in St. Mary's, her access to the air travel was easier than my access from Swift Current to air travel and trying to make ourselves meet. Anyway, those are some of the reminiscences I have of Marlene. I hope you enjoyed them.
Marlene, how do you summarize 50 years or more of knowing someone? I'm listening to people talk about Marlene's life, and much of it I wasn't a part of. But some of it I was, and I hadn't thought of it. 50 years. When I first heard about Marlene, or met Marlene, was back in the 70s. Oh, 1970. Am I too far, too close? Okay. Yeah. We were living in Peterborough, and Marlene was going to Trent University, and she was also going to Sir Sandford Fleming. It was in Sir Sandford Fleming that I met her. And it was quite a time. We were in a class, and the two of us were the oldest in this group that was going through the college at Sir Sandford Fleming. And there was a lot of young kids, 18, 19, 17, and we were 20, and I was older. and so we were old folks in the class. And we had many, many opportunities to just have really meaningful discussions. If you know Marlene, and you all do, you can have a discussion that can go on for hours and hours and never exhaust the topic. We, at one point, got to talking about religion, and I introduced her to the concept of the Baha'i faith. Well, needs to say, she became a Baha'i, and I heard some years later that she said something to someone like, I consider Paul Schofield my spiritual father. And I thought, my goodness, how could she do that? Because I think of her as my teacher. She was the kind of person that could take an idea, digest it, and give it back to you in such a potent manner. So, in fact, she became my spiritual teacher for years. We went through college together at Sir Sandford Fleming. We left college, and then we were off to Ottawa, where we both got jobs with the Canadian Government Office of Tourism. We worked in the same office. We worked in just offices next to each other. We were in each other's face almost 24/7. Not only that, when we went home, she lived upstairs, I lived downstairs in an apartment in Ottawa. For years, we were very close to one another. I sat down with my wife, Rana, and I said, I've got to say something to a group of people about my relationship with Marlene. So we started talking. 2 hours later, we were still talking about this relationship with Marlene. How do you summarize 50 years of someone being in your life? And the only person that's been in my life longer is my brother. I thought that was rather strange. The times that we spent together were extraordinary. And yet, there was years where we never talked to one another. Where she was off in Australia, and then to Newfoundland, and I was off to New York and London and other places we were working for the federal government. And then it seemed like every time we came together, it's like no time had passed at all. I found that interesting because that's the only person other than my own wife that I felt that way. Marlene has always occupied a place in my heart, a place in my memory, even when she wasn't around me. I didn't know Marlene as Marlene. I knew her as Marl. That was it, Marl. I think about, well, what do I think about? I heard so many things that I related to when I heard you speaking that I'm thinking, well, what have I got to say that's unique? You know, we started coming to St. Mary's when Marlene moved here, and she invited us up to go to Stratford. She loved Stratford, as you all know. And we learned so much about all the plays. So she invited us, and one year we said, yes, we'd like to come. Where do we stay? And she said, oh, I got that under control. I got that under control. You can stay in my place because the lady down the hall is going away and she's going to be away for a week. You stay in my place, I'll go down there. She was so generous with her time. And not only that, we would go and see plays that she would recommend. And the detailed description of those plays was, well, it was fantastic. Marlene has always been somewhere on my periphery. If she wasn't right in front of me, she was at least within my periphery. I want to say a shadow, but that has negative context. She was like a force that was out there that I knew, even though I hadn't spoken to her for some years. She was always there. You know, Rhonda and we sat down for a couple of hours and started writing notes, and I realized that I couldn't spend 3 or 4 minutes at a podium because 50 years is too much time to summarize in 3 or 4 minutes. And I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. I don't think I am. You know, I think of vignettes of time and vignettes of things that we did together. Like, I recall being in school, in college, and I was having problems with college because of my, I was diagnosed at the time with a form of dyslexia, and so I really had a challenge with being in a lecture and trying to write notes and listen to what was going on. Those are two functions I couldn't do it at the same time. And I recall taking a tape recorder into the lectures and then going home and transcribing them. And Marl would say to me, well, why are you doing that? Here's my notes. Well, if you know the detail of Marlene, the textbook wasn't that detailed. And I attribute the fact that I was able to get through that college in 2.5 years, other than 3, because of Marlene. And she was such a help. She's always been a presence in my life. And I don't know how else to summarize it. She is part of me. Even though she's left, she's got a room in my heart. That's where she is. Thank you, Marlene. Thank you so much. We love you, both Rhonda and I. Thank you.
I'm Ginny Rochester Orr, and I just wanted to share a couple of memories of Marlene. First of all, this is a wonderful arrangement. I can't believe how well that team has organized this interface. It's terrific. And I'm sure Marlene would be absolutely loving this. So I met Marlene, I guess a lot of us go back to when we first met her, but I met her years ago when we were young adults, and she was living in Ottawa. I was living in Newfoundland, and I came up to Ottawa to do field work. And I was at a Baha'i gathering one evening and heard of a talk that a member of the national governing body was giving. And in Newfoundland in those days, Newfoundland was considered way behind the times. Nobody wanted to visit. It was considered a remote outpost. People told jokes about it. And almost nobody visited. So it would be, even for the Baha'i community, it would be rare to get a visitor once a year, once every 2 years. So the idea of the opportunity to hear a distinguished person giving a talk was something I wasn't going to miss. So I began asking everybody at the gathering who was going and could I hitch a ride with them. And I discovered I couldn't find anybody who was going. And I didn't realize then that, this was a common experience for them to have speakers like this. And the person was giving the talk in one of the remote suburbs of Ottawa, so it wasn't worth their effort to go. And so I was fairly disappointed about this. And then in the course of the gathering, I met Marlene, and I lamented to her that I couldn't find a ride. And she said, "Oh, well, I'd be happy to take you." And I said, "Oh, were you planning to go?" And she said, "Well, no, but I'll take you, and I'm happy to stay." So for me, that was great. I was delighted. And I share it because to me, it illustrates that spirit of service that Marlene had, that if she saw a need and she had any possibility of doing anything about it, she would jump right in and do it without a moment's thought. So that was the beginning of our friendship. And then it got cemented when I learned that she had a pony. That had been my lifelong dream up to that age, to have a horse. And to meet somebody who had owned a horse was amazing to me. So anyway, I wanted to also share that I feel, as others have spoken about their friendship with her, Marlene was one of the most loyal friends I have ever met. It didn't matter how long you had been out of touch, whether you were the one who had ceased communication the last time. As soon as you contacted her, Marlene was just there. Same person, same conversation, same friendship, same quality of relationship. She was so loyal. And that story that was shared about her watering the trees that were planted is another illustration of that unflinching loyalty. And then one other thing, Marlene was very, very astute about people and about animals. And for a long time, I didn't realize that really cats were really her favorite animal. It was sort of hard to tell because she would tell a lot of jokes about cats, and they weren't always kind jokes about cats. She really had fun with their idiosyncrasies. So anyway, in the later years of knowing Marlene, before she started up her house and pet sitting business, we had a dog and we were going away for a few days. We wanted someone to dog sit rather than put the dog in a kennel. And Marlene loved trips to Toronto. Any opportunity to come to Toronto was great. She could see her old friends. She could, do things that she couldn't get to do in St. Mary's. So it seemed like a really good fit to ask her to come up and look after our dog. So our dog was named Kaya, and you need to know that she was an Australian Shepherd, which, if any of you know these dogs, they're known for their intelligence and for their amazing physical skills and their high trainability. So they can be trained to do actually very complex tasks. So Marlene, we invited Marlene, and she said, "Sure, I'll think about it, but I need to come and visit first." So we said, "Okay, great." And we settled on a weekend for her to come. And she came up. She got there about noon or so, and we had a little visit in the kitchen. And I left the room for a minute to do something, and I came back. And Marlene said, "I have my answer for you." I said, "What do you mean? You've just arrived." And she said, "I'm not going to dog sit." I said, How can you know this so quickly?" She said, "Well, Kaya came in and she looked at me and I looked at her, and I could tell she thought she was smarter than me." So that was the end of any dog sitting with Kaya. Anyway, these are just a few things that I wanted to share. There are many things to treasure about our relationship with Marlene, and I just wanted to share these couple of things.
Thanks, Ginny. I'm Susan Gamage. Marlene and I met probably in about 2000 when I was living in Stratford. My son was going to Nancy Campbell. And Marlene always wanted to recruit people to come to St. Mary's and live in St. Mary's and save the local spiritual assembly. So she worked very hard at recruiting me. But I got to know her best when she came for a visit as a travel teacher when I was serving the Baha'i faith in Cyprus. She was on her way to Haifa, Israel, for her Baha'i pilgrimage. And she went back to Cyprus a year later as a short-term pioneer, and I stayed for 3 months. And while she was there, I did some house sitting for her, looking after her cat Persia, and then, of course, stayed in St. Mary's for another year. Marlene loved haiku poems and taught this form to other people because it was so easy to write a poem, to write a haiku. And she, it's a simple way to be creative. So if you don't know, haikus are a 3-line poem that tell a story in 17 syllables. The first line has 5 syllables, the second has 7, and the last has 5. And when she returned from Cyprus, she wrote a series of haikus as part of her report in what she called A Pioneer's Prayer in Haiku. So I'd like to read it for you now, with apologies to those in the audience unfamiliar with Baha'i jargon she uses as she pours out her heart. O Baha'u'llah, let me voice my praise to thee. I am your servant. I live to serve thee. Obeying the call to teach, I come to Cyprus. This sun-kissed island longs for thy healing message, yearns for harmony. A single Baha'i can start core activities in her neighborhood, a Ruhi Book 1, a weekly devotional, a new children's class. Oh my God, where's the second page? The second page. How is that possible? I must have. Just give me a second. It was me who was praying there wouldn't be any technology glitches, and I was the one who made one. Let me just continue. The guidance is clear. Clusters advance the process of entry by troops. Core activities multiplying by cluster build human resources. More human resources, teaching, consolidating methodically. May we teach your cause with true love and selflessness. Make us hollow reeds. Let Cyprus flourish. May the religions agree. Peace and unity. In service to thee, we bow down in gratitude and humility. In his service, Marlene Macke.
Thank you, Susan. That was very special. I'm Ann Perry. I live in Texas. And I first met Marlene at one of the Association for Baha'i Studies conferences, either the one in Toronto in 2014 or in 2012 in Montreal. I remember attending her presentation on Baha'i history and biography and having a conversation afterward. We immediately began an email correspondence, deciding to meet every Baha'i month on or around the feast day. These emails would be writer check-ins. We would list what we had achieved along with a list of our current goals and give feedback to each other, critique as well as affirmation. These scheduled monthly emails continued for a time and then turned into more spontaneous correspondence, often when one of us needed feedback on a literary project. I had never had such a consistent writer buddy. She was always responsive and helpful, and we both did some editing for each other. In the fall of 2014, Marlene asked for a suggestion about where she might go for her own winter writers' retreat. I suggested Desert Rose Baha'i Institute in Arizona, which she had never heard of. She arranged to go there, and she spent February there in 2015 and 2016. She developed great friendships with the locals, including Lajmaya, who's here, and Doris, who was here but had to leave, and quickly became part of the community. She also enticed other Canadians to come down, and she started a winter migration. Lynn and Heather, who are online here today, are among the Canadians who went to Desert Rose as a result. She later wrote to other writers, "I highly endorse Desert Rose as a place to write or for any creative retreat purpose. I spent the month of February there in 2015 and 16. First time I wrote a complete first draft of my play, and this past year I worked on other writing projects. Very conducive atmosphere with peace and quiet, fabulous people and lovely local Baha'i community, excellent arts symposium, quite inexpensive, yummy food, full Baha'i library resource at hand, met several like-minded writers, artists, lovely weather for the snowbirds, decent internet connection. What more could a Baha'i writer want or need?" And I wish I could show you some pictures here, but you'll see some of them if you look at the slideshow on the funeral site. In 2017, Marlene and I started talking about a writer's retreat at Desert Rose, and she and I co-hosted the first one in 2018, creating the Right Life entity. It was highly successful, with our personalities and attributes complementing each other. Every day she planned a gift to give to participants. In 2019, we again co-hosted the retreat. We shared the Sears cottage that year. Marlene wasn't feeling well and often couldn't eat much. I remember nights when a healer would come to our cottage to work on her. She hadn't been diagnosed yet, and despite her physical discomfort, she brought enthusiasm to the retreat and did not complain, but rather took her suffering in stride. What an example she was. After the retreat, she drove to our home in Texas on her way back to Canada and spent 2 nights, again not eating much, not feeling well, and then traveled to Little Rock, where she stayed 1 night with my mother and brother. She bravely soldiered on, but had to be rescued by friends when she just couldn't drive further. Her diagnosis came as a shock to all of us, as did her absence at the 2020 retreat. But she literally couldn't travel then. She was pragmatic about her illness and her coming death. I was always amazed at her stoic and logical approach to her earthly life's end. Years earlier, I had read her final wishes document, where she specified so clearly what should be done and where her possessions should go. She quietly and systematically brought her affairs to conclusion. Marlene maintained an appreciative stance toward others. After I sent her a link to our new video, she wrote, "Bravo, Ann and Tim, MM." She also responded to the Right Life reports with such messages, "Lots of good news from several people." She arranged for her own theatrical works to be put online by Jonah Winters and advised us how to reach him to post our own. When we called her from one of our online Right Life meetings, she was thrilled. Marlene died on January 10th, only a week after she posted her last weekly hello to numerous friends who followed her adventures and insights, humorous stories, and references to the faith. She ends her last post with, "Hoping this finds you well and happy. Stay safe, MM." A few weeks earlier, she had written, "Here we are nearly halfway through December, and I'm still alive and kicking. Well, maybe not kicking, but managing on a day-to-day basis. I have version 2 of my obituary written. It's hard to write about oneself. My first draft was more like a resume, but some of my writing friends helped out with more personal stuff." To me and to Janie Toth, who were urging her to put more personal information in it, she had written, "Good morning, my beloved ones. I still wasn't satisfied with my obit, and the writer's creed of show, don't tell niggled me. So I added some more to it. I promise this is the last, unless you think it is a bit over the top. Best love, MM." At the end of the obituary, along with specifying how others might contribute in the wake of her passing, she suggested that American friends might donate to Desert Rose in her memory. Marlene's capacity for humor never wilted. A few weeks before she died, when I wrote to her about how Bob Harris responded to a rejection I had gotten, a writing rejection I had gotten by saying, "Just focus on the line from the prayer. I will not dwell on the unpublished things of life." Marlene responded, "That line is fabulous. It ranks up there with Illumine My Pies, MM." Marlene was such a wonderful friend, a literary buddy, a writer, historian, and Baha'i, and I'm so grateful to have known and cared about her deeply during the last few years of her life. I wish I could share with her my own current cat tales, as we have 7 3-week-old kittens right now, and I'm sure she would love seeing their photos and hearing about them. The prayer I would like to say for her now is one she herself chose. Bestow upon thy heavenly handmaiden, O God, the holy fragrances born of the spirit of thy forgiveness. Cause her to dwell in a blissful abode. Heal her griefs with the balm of thy reunion, and in accordance with thy will, grant her admission to thy holy paradise. Let the angels of thy loving kindness descend successively upon her and shelter her beneath thy blessed tree. Thou art verily the ever forgiving, the most generous, the all bountiful. Abdul Baha.
Yes, it's my turn. Well, thank you very much, Anne Perry, and good to see you. Still ticking. And I've got 2 items, maybe 2 items to share with you. Now, I did not know that Marlene was such an animal lover. If I did, I would be tempted to have called her book, with her friends, as a book about dogs or cats. But in any case, I've loved being with her, of course, and seeing her and so on. But I've written a loku, not a haiku, a loku about Marlene. And this is about the group of 7, the 20th Planers, a strange group of Baha'is in Toronto who believed in contacting the 20th plane to be informed about the future. And they got music, songs, maybe even glossolalia, who knows, all from the 20th plane. And so I was very impressed by Marlene's history, of course, and he did. Here's what I wrote about Marlene as a poem or as a loku. Our Marlene and history. It is Marlene who deserves a major ode for carrying history's narrative load. Don't let her look at a pristine photo behind her desk. Fool you as a person who always says tisk tisk. Let's see the characters filling her books. Dreamers, the 20th planers, they all seem to be rooks. The truth, each of them was a wayfarer. Like her, you can't get that much rarer. And so her books were really was the wonderful edge of scholarship about Baha'i studies. Now, I'm torn between two more small stories. Okay. And now Marlene says, now to my last story, my last real story from New York. Mildred Mulcahy and her husband, Rafi, lived on Long Island. She was an expert in the field of ceramics, a business person, and a philanthropist. Their business concentrated on producing high-end porcelain and china. Some of this ended up in the White House and later the dining room of the seat of the House of Justice. Mildred invited Will, me, that's to speak, give a talk, a fireside talk. They must have been very wealthy, as their home was a mansion with the biggest living room I'd ever seen, an equally huge dining room side. When Will finished his talk, I happened to be nearest the dining room. I didn't see any coffee on the table, while there was a huge samovar full of tea. Persian tea, good. I decided, what the heck? I was parched. I filled the cup. Mildred swooped down out of nowhere and ever so gently withdrew the cup from my hand. Then she said so kindly, "This is how we do it." She took a fresh cup and put about half an inch of tea from the samovar of the cup. Then she turned to a smaller silver samovar and poured boiling water in the cup to fill it up. It was the last point, and I reflected, maybe I'm a hit from the sticks. In my defense, there would not be many living things in a little rural town where I grew up who would be adept at fine dining at a Persian home, then or now. And of these customs from other cultures are indeed merely customs. A part of it, all peoples are spiritual beings, and their virtues are what is important. As in my own, but I met a number of Samoans who were very kind and courteous. Now, the last story, and it's really a Cirque du Soleil experience. Far from it. When I visited an EBS meeting in Ottawa, for a reason I don't know, I invited Marlene to come to New York. I was just appointed to be an advisor, a representative of the Baha'i International Community of the United Nations in New York City. So I invited her. And this is what she wrote about that experience. Now for the pièce de résistance, and for debut, this is next to me. First trip to New York City. I met Will at an Association for Baha'i Studies conference in Ottawa in the fall of 1975. We hit it off. He was on his way to New York City to work at the International Baha'i Community at the United Nations and asked if I would come to visit. I agreed. I arrived in the city of the Covenant later that fall. Will asked if there was anything I particularly wanted to do, see. And I said, yes, I want to go to a play on Broadway. He allowed that he didn't know anything. He confessed he didn't know anything about theater. He said if I picked out a play, he would get the tickets. I perused the thumbnail description of the New Yorker and selected Equus. Not that I had the least idea what it was about. Richard Burton playing in the lead role. Our tickets were in the top balcony, and thinking back, even they must have cost a fortune. When arriving at the theater, I was dismayed to find that Burton was being replaced by Anthony Perkins. You know, the actor who played in Psycho. It didn't occur to me that Perkins might be a stage actor too. Richard Burton was not a spa retreat for drunks trying to dry out. I have to say Perkins was a very fine actor. Well, the plot. Young stable boy had stabbed some horses in his care. I was having appointments with a psychologist. There were flashbacks. In one of them, the stable boy and the stable girl were ripped off their clothes. with Velcro. It was very audible right up to the gods, and both appeared stark naked on the stage. Will reared up in his chair and loomed over me and hissed, "Did you know that was going to happen?" And I cowered in my chair, replying, "No, no." Around us for 3 or 4 rows, I could hear people snorting with laughter and thinking, "Oh boy, these kicks from the sticks." Will and I have both dined out on the story for years. Whenever we were with people who knew us both versions did very different. Not long after I left, Debbie snapped up Will and moved to Australia. Win-win. Thank you so much for being part of your celebration.
Well, dear friends, thank you so much. Thanks to all those people who are joining us online. There's just a lot of people who've been involved in this. And what an inspiration to hear these stories, to remember Marlene. I'm sure she's touched all of our lives. And she encouraged me a lot personally in my wish to start writing. When I went back to university to study, when I was flagging or unsure of myself, here she was. She really took advantage of, she wore it lightly, but she used it to encourage others. The fact that she was a published author, and yes, you can do this, and everything seemed easy for her, and so it was a great deal of encouragement. It seems like everything she did was for others. Even her work, her writing, her travel, her conversations, the way she would encourage and help others. So thanks, Marlene. Thanks to family, friends who've all gathered here. Susan and Coralie were asked by Marlene to take care of all her affairs after her passing, and they've really done an outstanding job. And Susan's worked very closely as part of this team to organize the celebration of life today. And I'd just like to thank all of you, Katie, who's been turning up at the meetings. Thank you so much. And of course, Moira, yes. So thanks very much, everyone. It would appear that I really must thank the baristas, but Andrew, you've been amazing. You pulled this off. Really like it. You are an expert.
Today. It's a wonderful thing.
It's right. Well, thank you so much. I'm amazed how well the voices came in from Zoom, and we heard everyone. Will's story, there were times when it was hard to understand, but I do have a script here if anybody wants to read any aspects that you missed. So we have water, we have coffee, we have cake. Please share. I seem to remember, if we'd say, all right, Marlene, is it time to have some coffee? And she's saying, yes. So anyway, thanks so much. And
could we have a little standing ovation, just like in the theater? Oh, yeah. At the end of theater funerals, everybody stands up and applauds.
That's a lovely idea. Thank you. Thank you.
So, let's clap for Marlene.
Dedicating the